GPA's future scientists, inventors, and engineers. It's Mr. Sargent here, and in today's video, we are going to prepare a virtual science fair project. Now, you have probably already seen in my past video how to create a trifold project, but today, I'm going to show you how to do a science fair project virtually. And as you know, our science fair projects are coming up. They're going to be due the week of April 19th. So we have a little bit of time to do this, but today's video, I am going to show you how to do a video science fair project. I know I'm excited as well, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in part 2 of my video, I'm going to show you how to do a Google Slides experiment where you can do your project on Google Slides. But for today's video, it's for all of you that want to create that video presentation. So, with no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started, GPA future engineers, scientists, and inventors, let's talk a little bit about the purpose of, well, this video and of the science fair. Well, plainly put, this past year has been a tough one. And ladies and gentlemen, I am just so super proud of each and every one of you for how hard you have worked, how much you've adapted, and just the increased love of science that I am seeing around this school. And I'm telling you, this science fair is going to be a time where we celebrate that. We celebrate you. Now, having said that, we do have some people that are going to do the trifolds, and that's awesome. If you need more help with that, let me know. I put a description in a link in the description below of a video you can check out to see where everything goes. It's going to be great. But we have some students that have moved away that still go to GPA. They may live too far away to bring their project in. In fact, I know 2 incredible future scientists that live in Texas and Utah that still check in with me every single day. And I want everybody to be involved in our science fair. So we're going to offer the option to do the science fair project virtually. Now, in part 2 of my video, I'm going to show you how to do a Google Slides presentation where you put your entire science fair project, everything you would put on a trifold, you could put in a Google Slides document. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to break down the tips and techniques and tricks that we're going to use to create a video presentation. All right? So let me talk to you a little bit about a few tips that have worked for me. Now, if you've already checked out my YouTube channel, you know that I have already created somewhere around 200 videos. When I first started videotaping my lessons and things like that, I had a tough time. But through messing up, through making mistakes, through experimentation, I have been able to find some tricks and techniques that will help anybody create a better video presentation. So for our science fair project, if you're going to do the video presentation, I have a couple of tips for you. All right. Tip number 1, write a script of what you want to say. Now, for every video that I do, I have things written down right here. Okay. This is sort of like a list of where I am, sort of like a checklist almost. And I script down what I'm going to say. And that leads to tip number 2. You practice. You practice, you practice, you practice, you practice, you practice. All right? If you're going to be on camera, if you're going to give a presentation, then you practice what you're going to say because you don't want to be halfway through your video and then, well, forget what you're saying. Trust me, I've been there. And that leads to step number 3. Now, step or trick number 3 is, well, you don't film everything in one part. Now, my videos are split into different parts because I've gotten to the point where if I film the entire thing and I'm getting excited about it, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I get towards the end and I just totally mess up. I don't want to have to start all the way over again. So if you film it in parts, and I'm going to show you the parts you can film it in, but if you film it in parts, you can edit it and put it back together and make an incredible video. And number 4 is have fun. Realize, ladies and gentlemen, that you may mess up. Even Mr. Sargent messes up. See, watch this. Before we start, ladies and gentlemen, just let... See, I have a whole film roll of me doing that right there. Now, it's okay to mess up. But the ultimate goal for this project is going to be to share our love of science and to get people excited about your science topic. So, how do we do it? How do we put a video together? Well, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to model the different steps that we need to do a science fair video. So, if you have notes, you may want to take notes right now. If you're not, you can just... So let's go ahead and get started with our purpose. Now, when you first start your video, you're going to talk about the purpose. Why did you choose this science experiment? Okay. Now, the model that I'm choosing today is, well, I'm going to attempt to put out some fire, which is in carbon dioxide. So, when I talk about my purpose, I'm going to say, well, growing up, I wanted to be a firefighter. In fact, I wanted to be the fire engine. I just like, the alarms. I just like the sirens. I think it's cool. But I learned after I turned 4 that I could not become a fire engine. But the idea of being able to save lives and put out fires has always intrigued me. So the purpose of my experiment is to learn how I can put out a flame using something other than water. Now, after I talk about my purpose, next comes the question. Now, the question, you can see it right here, using carbon dioxide, can I put out a flame? Now, every good science experiment starts with a question, ladies and gentlemen. Every good science experiment. You got to be questioning, well, what we're doing and what we want to find out. So mine is right here. After that, we have one of my favorite parts, the hypothesis. Now, if you don't know what a hypothesis is a guess, okay? When we're talking about a guess, we're talking about whether or not it's going to work. Well, having done this experiment before, I know mine is going to work, but some of you may be doing your experiments for the first time. So it's okay to say, no, I don't know if it's going to work. Or yes, I think this is going to work. I like the confidence. So if we say yes, explain to me why you think this is going to work. So for me, my hypothesis for this experiment is going to be, yes, I will be able to create carbon dioxide to put out a flame. Now that we have our purpose, we have our questions, we have our hypothesis done, let's talk about materials. Because one of our purposes of these science fair projects is to get people excited about science, you kind of want them to try it at home. Now, for my experiment, you're only going to want to try it at home when you have parental supervision. So you let them know what materials they're going to need to do this experiment as well. Now, today, for our experiment, for today's experiment, all we're going to need is vinegar, baking soda, a container to mix them in, and a candle. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, whenever you're dealing with something dangerous, such as either chemicals or flame, you're going to want parents' supervision. So we now have our materials. So what's the next step? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's doing the experiment. So now that we've tried the experiment at least twice, we now have our next step, which is results. The results of my experiment were that when I mixed the vinegar in with the baking soda, I was able to create enough carbon dioxide to put out the flame. Now, I also kept track of the time that it took, because that leads to the next step of the scientific method, and that is data. Now, the first time I did this experiment, it took me that many seconds for the flame to go out. But the second time I did it, it took that long. Now, what could account for the difference there? Well, we don't know. It could be a different variable. It could be a different thing. And maybe I didn't measure the same amount in each one. But that's one of the great things about science. Sometimes we have variables out there that just change our experiment. So now that we've gone through the purpose, the question, the hypothesis, the materials, the experiment, the results, and the data, we have our final step, and that is the conclusion. Now, in the conclusion, this is where you tell what you learned. Now, what I would put in my conclusion video is this. Did I explain the science behind what I did in my experiment? Yes. Was it easy to understand? Absolutely. And that is the purpose, ladies and gentlemen, of the Science Fair Project. Creating a science project that you can teach others about. Now the question is, how do I put everything we just did together? Well, let's take a look. Purpose. The purpose of my experiment is to be able to put out a flame using certain chemicals that you may find around the house. Question. Will I be able to do this based on the materials that I have? Materials. The materials that I have vinegar, baking soda, a candle, and a container to mix. Hypothesis. I will be able to create enough carbon dioxide to put out a flame. Now, my first step is always going to be gather my supplies. And I just so happen to have all my supplies right here. My next step is going to be, well, I am going to put some baking soda in my container. Now, if you're measuring and things like that, this is also when you tell your audience, I'm putting in 3 spoonfuls or 4 spoonfuls, or if you're going milliliters or ounces of things that you're going to put in, this is when you stress that to them. But for today's, I'm just going to put it in. Okay? So if you look, there's the baking soda. Now my next step is going to be, well, pour the vinegar in. Now, with this next step, it's also important to observe what happens. So when you think about what's going to happen when you put vinegar in with baking soda, it's definitely going to have a reaction, isn't it? We got an acid and a base. Of course it's going to. So let's go ahead and pour the vinegar in. And you know what? Sometimes you mess up and make a mistake, and this is what happens when you don't measure. But can this still work? Absolutely. Because ladies and gentlemen, sometimes science is messy. But I can still use this. Even though it seems I messed up and made a mess everywhere, I can still use this. Because what did I just create here? Well, I created a chemical reaction. Now, inside this container right now is, well, a gas. Now, I don't necessarily have to explain what I'm doing just yet, but my next step is going to be to pour out the gas out of this. Now, it's important to let people know that, ladies and gentlemen, I am not going to pour out any liquid here. But let's see what happens when I pour out the gas. You see that? The flame went out, didn't it? So, was I able to create something that created, well, put out a flame? Absolutely. My results? It works. My data? Right here. It took 2.8 seconds the first time I did it. It took 3.6 seconds the second time I did it. And my conclusion? My conclusion is this. Using the materials that I had around my house, I was able to create enough carbon dioxide to put out a flame and take the oxygen that the flame and the fire feed off of out of the equation, and the flame went out. Now, I know about you, ladies and gentlemen, by putting all those pieces together, that was pretty easy, wasn't it? Now, will this take a lot of work? Absolutely. But do you have to do it alone? Absolutely not. Ladies and gentlemen, your teachers are here to help. I'm here to help. You can actually send me any questions or any need for ideas or advice to my email account right here. Just send me an email if you need any help whatsoever. Now, if you also need help editing your video or putting things together, just reach out and communicate. That's why we're here to help. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to make this the most incredible science fair ever. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be able to do that because of people like you and great students like you, great future scientists, engineers, inventors like you. So ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to hearing from you, and I really look forward to seeing your projects. Now, remember, in part 2 of my video, I'm going to share with you how to create a Google Slide science fair presentation. But for today, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out or rewatch this video again. All right? So I hope you guys are going to have a great spring break, and I will see all of you later.